Hello, and welcome to Shaking and Sipping. This is the show where we shake and stir a cocktail or other mixed drink, sip it, and talk a little bit about its history and maybe look at some variants. We are currently working through the list of IBA official cocktails. We're in the unforgettable section, and this week the unforgettable is the Casino. Now, the Casino, from what I can see, is a fairly forgettable drink. There's just not that much written about it. There's not a lot of variants out there. But it sounds promising, and I think it is going to be a good drink, and we are going to do two different variants of it, so no worries there. For the Casino, it's a pretty simple drink. It is going to be gin, specifically Old Tom, which we'll talk about, maraschino, orange bitters, and lemon juice. And that's it. Pretty simple beverage. Now this one, again, like the last couple, the IBA has stopped giving us any kind of history on it, which is a shame because we have a pretty good idea of the history for this. There are a few sources that credit it to friend of the show, Hugo Insulin, in his 1916 book. That's certainly false. We definitely have it back to at least 1909 in J.A. Didier's book, The Reminder. Now, I say at least 1909 because J.A. Didier's book is interesting. It is a vest reference guide, so a bartender would wear this in his vest. It has very short recipes. He specifically says at the beginning, I'm not going to give you exact mixes of these. I'm going to talk about pour a drink of this and a dash of that. You should figure it out yourself, but it's meant to be a reminder, a quick reference to what the heck is that drink again? Oh, it's something like this. Now, the problem is, he also says these are all like popular drinks that I collected, except for the ones that I made up. And by the way, I'm not going to give you any history or notes about any of these. So it may well have been one of the ones he made up, or it could have already been popular in its time. Now that's 1909. This drink using both lemon juice and maraschino, certainly not going to be that much older than that. If it was older than 1890, that would be shocking. Because we just don't have other drinks like that in that time. So it probably is turn of the century, quite possibly attributed to our friend J.A. Didier. I do want to, it's unrelated to the drink, but at the beginning of his book, he has a little section with a bunch of just notes on things. And a lot of them are really useful. They're how many glasses of wine you can pour out of this type of wine bottle, and conversions of weight to volume, and all sorts of other things that could be very handy. And then there's two things that are just utterly useless. So one is a section that tells you the contents of a freight car of whiskey contains from 55 to 65 barrels. And a car of beer contains from 70 to 76 barrels. And it goes on like that. I just find that very interesting. While you're mixing a drink, someone's like, hey, how many cases of whiskey came on that freight train last Thursday? That's unhelpful. The other thing, and this one we should all take, very seriously. I think he really revolutionized medicine here. He tells you that doctors usually prescribe champagne for the stomach, port wine for the blood, claret for the liver, Tokay for the system. You know what that is. Whiskey for strength, brandy for faintness, rum for colds, sherry for weakness, gin for the kidneys, white wine for fatness, Scotch whiskey for the lungs, and blackberry brandy for dysentery. So if you find yourself suffering from dysentery, make sure to get some blackberry brandy today. Okay, that is enough random knowledge about J.A. Didier. Let's go ahead and mix up the IBA version of the drink, and then we're going to go back and mix up an older variant. So we are going to go ahead and shake this one. So in our shaker tins, we are going to need 10 milliliters of lemon juice. That is 1/3 of an ounce. Add that. We're also going to need 10 milliliters of maraschino. So 1/3 of an ounce. We want 2 dashes of orange bitters. This orange bitters just dashes incredibly slowly for some reason. And then the star of our show is Old Tom Gin. Now, if you're not familiar with Old Tom Gin, this is sort of middle gin. So first there were the Hollands gins, which came over from a lot of places. Then in England, especially in London, it became very popular, and folks started making a different version of it that's less sort of whiskey-like, a little bit sweeter. That is Old Tom. And then from there, we eventually get to the London Dry Gins, which are dry by comparison to Old Tom. So that is what we need. We need 40 milliliters. That is 1 1/3 ounces. Let's grab some ice and shake it. All right, we got a big cube and a couple small cubes. Let's go. And then this is going to be served in a rocks glass over some ice. And we'll go ahead and strain that in. And then for this one as a garnish, we need both a strip of lemon and a maraschino cherry. We're gonna take our strip of lemon, and we are gonna grab a pick. We're gonna start that through on this side. Grab a cocktail cherry. Add that in the middle. Wrap it with the peel. It's not necessary, but I'm not nearly as annoyed with it as I was with some of them, except my cocktail picks aren't long enough to make that hold, so let's just pretend that that's sitting right there. So perfect. All right. Drop that right in. And this is the IBA spec Casino. It's good. It's not amazing. So the Old Tom is fairly sweet. The maraschino is very sweet. So there's a little bit too much sweetness happening, which I don't think is a terrible thing, but it's just a little bit muddled, which I find sometimes Genevre or Genevers sometimes taste kind of muddled because it's just malt and there's a little bit of inherent grain sweetness to it. This is doing a similar thing for me, where there's just not enough cutting through. I want something to hit me in the face a little bit more. I'm gonna, on the fly, let's go a little more lemon. And you know what, one extra shake of orange bitters, which I don't think really is a mod, because this just barely drips out, and so I don't trust its dashes. Compared to like my regular Angostura, it's like a third the amount that comes out of this. So I might have overdone it a little bit. It's now definitely lemon heavy. It's more to my palate, but I think I did kind of ruin the drink a little bit. But this is how I would rather drink it. All right, so that's the IBA spec. Now let's talk about an older variant. So one person I don't think we've talked about so far as much as Insulin and Macalone and others is David Embry, and I'm sure we will talk about him again in the future. He wrote the 1948 classic, The Fine Art of Making Drinks. Really great cocktail author. It's the encyclopedia of its day for cocktails. And he has a version of this that he's written down in that 1948 article. Now, I grabbed a copy of it here just because I love this note that he had, and I have no idea where this is from, but he says that it should be noted that at least one recipe book lists, under the name of Casino, a quite different cocktail made with gin, whiskey, Cointreau, Slivovitz, and Italian vermouth. Horror of horrors. Which, that sounds disgusting. Slivovitz is like plum brandy. So gin, whiskey, plum brandy, Cointreau, and vermouth. we're not trying that today because that is disgusting. But we will try David Embry's version of this drink. And so for this, we're going to be using a mixing glass instead of shaking it. So I'm going to grab some ice to put in there. And it should be noted that in the J.A. Didier version, it is also built stirred rather than shaken. And for this one, we have a slight difference. We're not using orange bitters anymore. We're using orange juice. And we are changing the proportions. So I'm just going to juice half an orange real quick here. Super. And we want just 5 milliliters. Oh, there's something left in there. We don't need that. We want just 5 milliliters of this. So that is 1/6 of an ounce. That is more than 1/6 of an ounce. Perfect. So almost nothing. We want the same amount of lemon juice. We want the same amount of maraschino. And then just as in the original, we want our 40 mils, or 1 1/3 ounce, of Old Tom. Which he just calls Tom, I think, in the recipe. Or no, that's Didier. Embry calls it Old Tom. Didier just calls it Tom, because it wasn't old then, I suppose. And that's it. So this is essentially going to be very much gin. So I think much like last week's, we really are going to have something that is just gin in presentation as opposed to more of a complex thing. So I'm just going to strain that off. And then for this one, we're just calling for a cherry. I'm going to forgo the ineffectual cocktail pick, but I am going to not get any juice in, which I normally like getting juice in, but I don't want to spoil the color too much. And that is the David Embry Fine Art of Making Drinks version of the Casino. Which really, I've got some cloudiness here. I should have double strained this. Yeah, I apologize for that, especially since I was just using the julep strainer. I should have used a hawthorn and double strained it. See, I actually like that more than the original one, because now I am just able to enjoy the gin. The rest of the things are just there to help out, even though my issue with the other one was that it was too sweet and we added orange to this one without bitters. We also cut way back on the maraschino, which is what was really reinforcing the sweet and malt notes of the Old Tom. And so what we're left with is just an enjoyable, mild gin with a little bit of color. Yeah, I really quite like that. What I'm curious about, I should have used the pick now, is how that cherry plays with this flavor profile. So let's simulate getting to the end of this. Okay, that goes incredibly well. I'd like this full of cherries, please. So, nothing crazy going on here. It's just an elevated gin experience. Tastes like gin in the best possible way. Thanks for coming along with me this week as we shook, stirred, and sipped 2 variants of the Casino. We'll be back next Thursday, as always, with the next drink in the unforgettable section of the IBA list. In the meantime, make sure you check the blog linked below for a write-up on this drink and some photos thereof. Also check the blog tomorrow, because that's when we'll post what happens when I go out into the world to a good cocktail bar, order this drink without any notes, see if they make it very often, see if they make any tweaks to it, etc., and we'll see how that goes. Also, follow me on Twitter at shaking_sipping, where you'll see when there's new blog posts, new videos, and any other things that are happening in my world. And until next week, happy sipping. Cheers.